I could have your attention, please. Thank you. Welcome to our afternoon session, our final day of the conference. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ambassador W. Robert Pearson. He is the president of the International Research and Exchanges Board, a role he has served in since November 2008. Previously, Mr. Pearson served as the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and is the director of human resources of the U.S. Foreign Service. He holds a BA from Vanderbilt University and a JD from the University of Virginia School of Law. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Pearson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to see such an enthusiastic group at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in Washington in the winter time. So I think you've already accomplished something that few other groups accomplish. I'm delighted to be here with you and give you some thoughts today and look forward to your questions. Since I spent a large part of my career in what I would call classical diplomacy, just wanted to talk for a minute about the sort of variations of diplomacy that will bring me to the subject I'm going to talk about to you today. You know, in classical diplomacy, the object of diplomacy is really to advance and protect the interest of a state, its citizens, to improve business relationships, and often classical diplomacy is cast in the form of a balancing act. In, I will call it normal cultural diplomacy, we're much more interested in mutual understanding, in sharing, in collaboration, a concept of equality, a concept of equal respect. But at least in the first years of, I'll call it normal cultural diplomacy, much of the effect, if you will, was accomplished by the mere exchange or travel. You had a musical group, or when I was in China, ballet groups coming to exchange, to visit, to sort of demonstrate the best aspects of another culture, and that itself was considered to have a kind of impact. But I think there's a new development of cultural diplomacy, which I think is much more focused on exchange for change, if I can call it that. It has a more articulated goal of bringing about a positive change, but to bring it about through the process of an exchange of ideas. So it's a combination, if you will, of keeping the sense of equality, mutual respect, and mutual understanding as a component, but managing also at the same time to focus on positive change in a society. I think that's very important because since we all know the state of the world today, it's easy for me to simply refer you to the fact that there are probably 20 or 25 countries, just look at the list of the G20, societies that are in the process of transitioning. And what we don't realize, I think, when we talk about transitioning societies is that in order to make the decision, if you will, to make that transition, you really have to cut your moorings to a lot of what you always knew. You have to deliberately set out on uncharted seas. I think the developed countries in the world, certainly in the United States and maybe elsewhere, I don't think the populations quite appreciate the psychological impact of the willingness to set sail on waters you haven't seen before. And also, to keep my metaphor going, these societies don't know exactly where landfall is, do they? They don't know exactly where they're going to end up, and they don't know exactly what they're going to be. And in trying to pick up ideas from the rest of the human community about what they want to do well, they have to pick and choose among alternatives without enough facts to feel completely confident that they're doing the right thing. So if we talk about cultural exchange in the aspect of exchange for change, there's some challenges and some aspects to it that are inherent in the process. So it becomes perhaps in a way less predictive than taking Twyla Tharp to China. So let me talk about that for a minute. I think there are some new premises, if I may, for this new diplomacy. First of all, it has to have a local focus and a local engagement, okay? We all know that normal cultural exchange is people to people, but really effective, lasting change that's incorporated into the culture and the values of any society has to show up at the local level, okay? So it has to go through a local filter, it has to have local, not just local content, but actually in a kind of important way, it has to have a local leadership. Does actually have to be focused on change. Does mean that something that was not there before is going to be there now, and that's going to cause a ripple effect in the society. People are going to have to adjust to that, make differences for it, and they will change it in the same way that Chinese food in the United States may not have a lot to do with Chinese food in China, okay? But nevertheless, it is a part of the process. Nextly, it can't simply be confined to the interaction between the group that might be coming from abroad and the group that's working locally. It has to be sustainable, right? So for all of the good things and the warm stories that I and many of my colleagues bring back about the wonderful experiences we have overseas, what really matters is whether it lasts. What really matters is whether the local community takes it on as something that belongs to them, acquires ownership, and considers themselves to be the idea, considers themselves to be the driving force for it. So I believe that while we've talked about that in lots and lots of places, and we still do, and I talk about that a lot, we still haven't actually integrated into our thinking process this reality. We still think of aid coming from developed countries going to developing countries in a way that is not precisely done on an equal basis. There appears to be something more knowledge coming in and a learning process at the other end. And I think that over time we're going to see an adjustment in that process, and we're going to see a recognition. Now, that in itself creates some issues because we also know that the organizations in receiving countries themselves are looking to other models. They're looking to models that may be more appropriate for them. They're looking to models, in fact, that may be more sophisticated. They're looking for models that may be more global. So they are going to have to take, as I mentioned before, a certain amount of risk in learning what to do. I was just talking to a man yesterday, a colonel in the Malian army, okay? And he was talking to me about how in his country people are worried about offers of assistance. What is actually intended? Is it to convert? Is it to substitute for their values? Is it to gain access to their natural resources? What's the objective? And I really appreciated the conversation with him because he was being quite honest. He was a man who was intelligent, educated, in a position of authority. He wanted to be able to have some kind of accurate measuring stick for how to react to influence from the outside world. I think that's a part of everything that's going to go on now in what I'm going to talk about, new cultural diplomacy, for a long, long time. Let me give you some examples, if I may, and these are just examples that will come from the work of my organization, the International Research and Exchange Board. We now operate in 120 countries around the world. We work on issues of education. We work on what is commonly known in the development community as civil society capacity building. I think it's more citizenship empowerment, teaching people to make the most of their rights and to recognize the obligations of citizenship. And finally, independent media. We set up independent television stations, independent radio stations. We actually not only teach journalism, but we teach the business plan. We teach, talked about sustainability. We teach how to make your radio station, your television station survive when we've gotten on the plane and gone home and left it for you. So recently I was in Jordan where we set up a number of provincial radio stations. I was in Rwanda last May and went out and visited some of the local radio stations that we set up. So that's the kind of work that we do, and I want to just give you some examples that I think reflect this idea of exchange for change and making use of local talent. First one comes from Russia. We have a program in Russia where we invite young people to come and give us their best ideas of what they need. We treat these young people as an asset, not a problem, and we then select the ideas that come to us as their best ideas, and then we put on a traveling show and go around the country promoting the Russians' own best ideas about what youth can do in other parts of the country. And that's been enormously successful. The people who are involved in it, of course, learn very valuable leadership skills, but they actually involve themselves in a peer-to-peer relationship and review and progress reports and so on, so they get to assume their own leadership. In our testing of our group, we found that 98% of the young men and women who went through this group involved themselves further in community activities after we left, as opposed to about 50% in those who did not. Secondly, we run a very interesting program in Tajikistan and in Kyrgyzstan, which is called Theater for Peace. We use a model which is designed to let people learn how to play roles of people in their society. And we teach people how to play these roles, and then we take that group of young people around to various villages and cities and have them put on their theater, their drama on these principles. At the moment, we're focusing on issues like child marriage and having young women stay in school and high school to graduate. So, for example, in one of the villages, we had all of the girls always left school after the 9th grade. They got married or they went to work, something, but they never finished. And after we put on the theater program with the children of the community playing out the roles of people, we even had a young man who decided that he would play the role of one of the child brides, and he refused to get married. So someone had to explain to him what the rules were of the game. In any case, after we had done this Youth for Peace theater, we had 24 young women who convinced their parents to let them stay in school for the next year. So that's the kind of thing where you are bringing an idea, but actually you're incorporating it into the very fabric of the community, and it's their decision about what they do. We run a program in Liberia by which we combine work with civil society organizations and with media groups. The media groups give publicity to what the civil society groups are doing. As you all know, Liberia has emerged from a very long and very bloody period of civil war and strife, and we think and a lot of people think that the country now is in a better position than it's been in for 20 years to try to make some progress in terms of social and political economic stability. So that's what our work is aimed at there. We had an election there this year, and we think that the work we did was helpful in keeping the level of violence very low and letting people pursue their differences through dialogue and through organization and not through violence. My next example is something we call community solutions. We invite established community leaders from lots of places around the world to come to the United States and match up with an American NGO that's doing something of the same work. So if they're involved in gender issues overseas, we put them with a U.S. organization that's focused on gender issues. If they're involved in voting rights issues, we put them with an American organization that does voting rights. Same with HIV, whatever it is, we match them with an American organization for 4 months. And then we, of course, have them return to their countries with the responsibility to start and carry out a follow-on program. And we help them develop those programs in their home countries. And this program also has stimulated their leadership skills, whether we're talking about management skills, trust-building skills, developing diversity of ideas, problem-solving skills. I'll just mention one example. Young woman who's named Dilnora Azamova of Uzbekistan went home and was hired as the national coordinator of health issues for youth by a German NGO working in Uzbekistan, and she's now the focal point for HIV issues in Uzbekistan for her new NGO. When she was in the United States, she worked with the New Jersey Women and AIDS Network, and now she has that resource of knowledge and information she can call on at any time to help her in her work. Finally, we're going to mention one of my favorites, which is a program we did in Moldova. As an ex-Soviet state, there never had been any effort in Moldova to develop citizen participation or the concept of citizen rights. And so we developed a program by which we would go into villages and we would spend 2 or 3 weeks talking to people about getting together to bring about local change in their communities. And at first they were all, and I mean typically in every village, very resistant. They couldn't do it. It was the state's responsibility. The communists caused all these problems. There's nothing we can do about it, kind of a sense of depression and despondency. And finally, we would get 8, 10, 12 people who were willing to say, okay, I'll take a chance. We made them vote an executive council by secret ballot. We tasked that team with negotiating with the mayor or the local governor, whoever it was, on an issue. In the one little village that I visited, they had no windows in the school. Kids went to school in the wintertime in Moldova with 3 coats, if they had them, and no windows. And so this group decided they were going to persuade the mayor to put windows in. The mayor insisted on putting heat into the school. Maybe he had a friend, I don't know. But they talked him out of it. So in the end, the mayor agreed that they would put in the windows. We paid for the windows. So once this group had learned that they could bring about change, once they felt empowered, there was no limit to what they were planning to do. Okay, next it was like pave the streets. Then it was get the street lights in. Then when I left, they announced to me that they wanted to make the village a model village for typical life in Moldova. Okay, but the fact is that once you tapped into that natural resource of human energy, they were off and running, and they certainly didn't need us anymore. And we did that over and over and over again in Moldova. And I'll just give you a couple of stats here to sort of illustrate what I'm talking about. 420 of the community leaders that we worked with were later elected to local councils. 6 of them were elected as mayor, and 12 went on to be members of Moldova's parliament. Okay? So again, it's really their idea, isn't it? You just give them the incentive and the conviction and the belief that it can be done, and then they go with it. And that's, again, returning to one of my basic themes that I wanted to talk to you about today. So, an interesting, that's the end of my examples, so I'm happy to refer to other examples or answer questions. But in beginning to wrap up here, I want to talk to you about the way young people, and me as one who's young at heart, looking at the world today, okay? There was a recent trust index published by Edelman. It's a worldwide public affairs, public reputation company at the Davos conference, and you can find it on their website if you want to. It's their trust index for this year. And the interesting thing about the trust index is that the public confidence in government and in business, no surprise, right, has gone down. And it varies from country to country, but if you're talking globally, government and business have suffered in terms of trust. And guess who has gained in terms of trust? NGOs and the media. Yes, everybody says the media. So I can't explain it, but in any case, people are now apparently more willing, and I'll say media obviously includes social media, right? So people are more willing to trust a contact, a source that they have established themselves, than they are necessarily getting their information, their trusted information, from some outside objective source they don't know about. But the reason I'm telling you this for purposes of our discussion is that I think this opens the door for more interaction at the community level and at the personal level and at the community organization level for cultural diplomacy. Referring back to some of the points I made before, that means that these projects, of course, do have to be locally relevant. They have to be doable. They have to be shared. They have to have collective impact. I don't know, there's a new theory coming out of Stanford about development, which is entitled Collective Impact. And if you wanted to look at it, you can look at the Stanford Social Innovation Review and find the article. But the notion is that often groups do different parts of a problem. Let's say you're dealing with childhood from 0 to 6, okay? One group will focus on nutrition, one group will focus on parental care, one group will focus on community engagement, one group will focus on, psychology, something. The idea would be acting independently, these groups do have an impact, but they don't have as great an impact as they might have, and they work with more isolated groups. So if you were able to gather all the stakeholders in a city or a community interested in the issue of childhood development, 0 to 6, every single one, no matter how big the group was, as big as this if you wish, then the hard part is getting that entire group to agree on a plan about how to deal with the problem, okay? Any of you who've had even any experience with small groups know how difficult it is to get a decision. And I often, when I talk to groups much smaller than yours, I say, okay, if you want a good illustration, we have 5 minutes to decide on the single thing we're going to have for dinner. You can pick the simplest kind of question, and in a group of people, I know you're smiling because you know it's impossible. Really, in 5 minutes, you're going to, So that's the hard part of this process. But once you get all the stakeholders in relative agreement about what they're going to do. Then the division of responsibility, the absence of tension among the groups and so on becomes much clearer, and they're able to do this. And if you read this article, you'll find several examples. I think they tried this in the school district, in one school district in Cincinnati, Ohio. It worked very well. They've tried it in other areas. And one of the things that IREX is doing in some of its work is trying to act as a catalyst for this concept of collective impact on issues overseas. So I share that with you, and hope it will have some interest for you. And then the last thing I mentioned, of course, is sustainability, ownership, and lasting. So just to recap very simply, what I've tried to talk to you about for a few minutes today is the cutting edge of cultural diplomacy, which is exchange for change. And deliberate change, obviously, as an American, it's democratic, healthy, open, transparent, participatory change, because I think that best reflects the human spirit. But it is the best way that I know of for us to talk about this issue of cultural diplomacy and the cutting edge of cultural diplomacy in light of all of the things that are going on in the world today. So I'm going to stop there. I thank you for your attention. I'd be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.